Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. Today's been a good day. I was looking to try to see what I could, cover for the 2A and politics and what was cool, and I've got a couple things that we'll cover. First and foremost, Tennessee facing down the same type of thing that we have had. I've spoke about this before. We have red flag laws in New Mexico. Tennessee's facing down that barrel. Their governor has been very gung-ho for it. But it appears that the voters in Tennessee are kind of like what most voters usually want. Enforce the laws you have on the books first, then we'll go after something else. If you hadn't heard, in Illinois and Michigan, there has been a weaponization. It's actually Iowa, too. There's been a weaponization of the IRS. The IRS has been used by the ATF and by the Biden administration to go after seemingly innocuous gun crimes, meaning that these are illegal firearms, and they're saying that they're tied to guns and to drugs. But it looks like they're ganging up, that the ATF and the IRS, the Alphabet Boys, they're all part of the problem, I guess, nowadays. And we need to be very careful and mindful of what's going on with this, because the longer we allow this to happen without us raising a stink about it, the more it will get intrusive and the more it will get to be a problem that we will have to remedy one way or another. Now, I understand the government keeps sending money to Ukraine, and they need their money. But the IRS going after law-abiding citizens, or even citizens in general, seems kind of counterproductive. The fact that we've armed 84,000 or 87,000 of these guys, and with the inflation or the newest round of debt ceiling stuff, they've negotiated that down to 15,000, so they say. But I'm sure they'll still find a way to get their 84,000 IRS agents in full battle rattle to go after us. In South Carolina, a bright spot. They have constitutional carry. Their session has ended or has adjourned for right now, but the talks for constitutional carry have not ended. If there's one thing that is probably the most important thing that any state could get that would be a buffer to tyranny, it would be constitutional carry. Allowing people to carry firearms without having to go through any rigmarole to get their firearm to carry legally is a good thing. I think that crime rates, and it's been proven out, that crime rates lower when you see this type of thing happens. And the reason being is if you're going to perpetrate a crime and you're no longer sure that the person, the victim, so to speak, is armed or not, you tend to value your life a little more, and you tend to quit being a turd. And that's what we need more of in society rather than less of in society. Now, I'm going to cover something, because I've compressed a lot into like 3 minutes already, that I think is kind of interesting. CAC Industries has a new bolt carrier group for the AR rifles. Now, what's interesting about this bolt carrier group is where the vent holes are, so that this is a suppressor-ready bolt carrier group. Now, they took a different tack in how to use the vent holes in the AR-15. Now, if you're not familiar with the AR-15, most of you guys probably are, because you're listening to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. There are vent holes on the side of the carrier that actually vent gas so that the gun will cycle and actually, well, basically that's what it is, and expend the round out of the chamber. Now, what they did is, instead of putting the vent holes on the side of the bolt carrier, they put them below it. And the idea here is kind of interesting. It's venting it down and away from the shooter's face, but this comes with a problem. This vent would actually vent the gas into the magazine, or the magazine well. Now, I don't think that there's enough gas that would go in there in a suppressed AR-15 that it would cause a round to go off or detonate. But that is kind of where the ingress of most bad, dirty things are in the AR-15 already, is in the mag well. Think about it, in your mag carrier. dust and dirt and debris get in your magazine, you insert that into the mag well. Now you have something that could possibly plug those holes. Now, I'm torn. And when I say I'm torn, I don't understand the purpose of actually suppressing an AR-15, period. Now, I understand the AR-15 is America's rifle, but the reason why I don't understand suppressing an AR-15 is to make a suppressor-friendly round for the AR-15. You're going to have to do a lot of gymnastics, a lot of reloading, or a lot heavier bullet than what the gun is designed for. And the whole purpose of the AR-15, the round itself, is designed to use velocity to make up for mass. Like a .308 has a certain mass, a bullet mass that it has. The 5.56 doesn't. The .223 doesn't. It only has like a 55, a 62, or like a 77 grain bullet. So that's, 1/3 of the weight of like a .308 bullet. So it depends on speed to make the damage it does in whatever intended target it's used against. So to me, you're always going to have, if you're going to have a usable AR anyway, you're going to have that velocity differential. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to make a suppressor for an AR-15 or to suppress an AR-15. Now, here's why. With that speed of the bullet, you're going to get an audible crack. Anything over 1,000 feet per second when it leaves the muzzle is going to make an audible crack, one that you're going to hear. And with the 5.56, you're looking at 3,000, 3,100 feet a second, depending upon the round. It could be as low as 2,500, 2,600. But that's still how it gets its energy to impart on its target. So what you would get is something that's kind of, to me, pointless in that you're going to lose some of that sound, yes, but you're still going to get an audible crack, even at the shooter's ear. So it's never going to be hearing safe. Will it help your hearing? Absolutely. Do I have any problems with people doing AR-15s, suppressing AR-15s? No way. I'm a big fan of, if you like it, do it. I think it's a cool gun. The AR-15 I've spoke about many times on this podcast, how it is America's rifle. I understand why people would want to do that. But if you were going to suppress something, why not a 300 black? If you're going to suppress something designed for being suppressed. So this bolt carrier, while it's neat, and I believe that if it's for a normal 5.56, I'd have to double check, but since they use the same case basically for the 5.56 and the AR-15, or the 5.56 and the 300 black, why wouldn't you use that suppressed bolt carrier just to try something different? CAC Industries, if you don't know who they are, they're not very well known. They're kind of newer that I've seen in the AR-15 circles for manufacturing and producing products. But what I like about them is they support a guy that I've talked about on this podcast before, Print, Shoot, Repeat. Now, why do I like that? I like Print, Shoot, Repeat because he is a true anarchist, a true person that's into freedom. And what I mean by that is the stuff he shows about printing guns or highlights, he can't really show it as much as he used to, is kind of the ultimate thing for freedom when it comes to the 2A. Because 3D printers go burr, and they're always going to be working. You cannot stop the signal. So as we're seeing more and more of the Biden administration going after, and the administration in general, gun control, this is the ultimate counter. If you think back to the early days of downloadable music, LimeWire, Napster, back in those days, that pretty much ended the music industry as we know it, the record stores, things like that. And that's what additive manufacturing is going to do to the 2A and to a lot of other industries in the world. And I think that as long as free speech exists and those files are considered free speech, and that's already been determined by the court. That's why DefCAD, if you don't know who DefCAD is, Cody, I got to remember his last name. He is one of the guys that started DefCAD, And he did it as a thumb in the eye to the ATF when they were worried about the first 3D printed guns. Now, additive manufacturing or 3D printing has gotten leaps and bounds better. The material science has actually caught up, and they've started making polymers that are worth using in firearms. They have a firearm now called the Orca. If you don't know what the Orca is, check it out. It is an AR-15 that is a completely printed upper and lower, except for the explodey bit parts, the parts that hold the explodey bits. That's impressive, considering just 5 or 6 years ago that wasn't a thing. And there's also the Plastikov. So the Plastikov, if you're not sure what that is, it is an AK-47 that uses a printed receiver. Now, it still uses metal trunnions and all those other pieces that you need to make sure the gun doesn't explode in your face. The same thing with the Orca. The Orca uses the same bolt carrier group, the same barrel extension and barrel that you would use in an AR-15, and those are what actually contain the force of the explosion. So those metal pieces are. And that would be what you would have to have in a polymer receiver of any kind, that it would be able to contain those pieces that still hold up to the force until they make materials that will. And I don't see that going to be very far off. We're having conversations about AI that I never thought we would have as an IT person. AI will eventually replace a lot of things because it's like the ultimate personal assistant. Now, with that, I wonder, just like a lot of us do, is AI, we've seen the movies like Terminator. Is that a good thing to let that loose and let that fly in the world? But, the way I see it nowadays, they're not going to listen to us anyway. They're going to do this whether we want it or not. And the only stopgap to that is your non-compliance, is the fact that you're willing to stand aside and say, no, enough's enough, And that's why I'm a big fan of 3D printed guns, and I'm a big fan of, any of these suppressor things that are coming out, because they're cool. A suppressor should be something everyone should be able to own without having to go through a lot of crap. And they make it that way right now because they think of it as the movie suppressor. The silent toof, toof, and that's all it does. That's not what a suppressed gun does. Being in the 2A, I've had the pleasure of shooting a couple suppressed guns now. And what is if the round isn't made for the gun to be suppressed, you're going to hear an audible crack even with a suppressor, and it's not hearing safe. It's better for your hearing than, a raw muzzle and the crack that comes off the end there. And it makes the guns look awesome, makes them look like they should in a lot of ways. It's nothing that the civilian should ever be restricted from owning, because it is a safety issue in my concern. Even if it doesn't make the gun completely hearing safe, it makes it better and closer to hearing safe, so that your hearing protection does even better for yourself. These things we keep seeing, or I keep reporting on, that are happening across the world and across the United States, where they're trying to suppress gun rights or rights in general. It's those anarchist ideas that our founding fathers would have had. They didn't willingly hand over their firearms. They stayed and hid them, and then they used them when they needed them. And I think that is what we need to be thinking about more and more and more, is that we're in that age where we need to be thinking about suppressors. We need to be thinking about what's going on in the 2A and how to keep the United States tactical. The way we keep the men or the alphabet dudes off our back is by making them afraid of us. I hate to say it that way. These people should be our best friends and should be our allies, but they should be the ally of the American people. And they're proven they're not. They've proven that they want to just collect a paycheck. So these are the stories that are going on in the 2A world. There's lots of other weird cultural things that I never thought I would see. I never thought I would see people that were so excited about a submarine blowing up that had millionaires on it. Now, why I say that, there's a lot of people that were praying for the death of these people or watching these people when the sub disappeared. If you don't know the story, there's a little submarine, a submersible called the Titan. It was one of those things made by millionaires that wasn't made to spec, is the best way to put it. And it ended up imploding as it was going down to check out the Titanic for some anniversary or something. And people paid $250K a pop to go there. What's interesting is the same time that this story comes out, and that the story comes out that they found it or they knew it imploded 4 days before they actually reported on it, the Navy did, is it seems to be a distraction the same time that stuff was coming out about Hunter Biden pleading guilty to tax evasion and gun charges. That same time, if you were paying attention to the news, Yevgeny Prigozhin, he's the leader of Wagner PMC, which is the Russians' private military contracting group that has basically towed a huge line in the Ukrainian war for Russia. And Prigozhin supposedly tried a coup that lasted 24 hours in Russia before he ended up retreating back to Belarus, is where he's at now. All of that seems a little bit hinky, and it doesn't seem... It looks like a distraction. That's the best way to put it. Because I've gotten to that point in my life where I'm like, what is going on in the world? What are they really trying to push you away from? And I honestly think it has to do a lot with Hunter Biden's laptop. I think there's a bigger story there that we only know bits and pieces of. And yes, his laptop was real. And those of us in the 2A world who pay attention to the news and check out alternative media to try to find and glean pieces of the news so we actually have a clue of what the hell's going on and where the bus is coming from to hit us, knew that Hunter Biden's laptop was real. You know, we knew it before the election. I think it's hilarious that Giuliani waited so long. He should have put that out way earlier, not as an October surprise, because then the story wouldn't have been able to die. And maybe we'd have a different result in the election we had rather than what we have. That said, I think there's a lot of people that simply don't like Trump, and that running Trump again may be a bad idea for that reason. There is enough people that have lost their mind over Trump that maybe it's time for something different. Now, that's if you're thinking that voting is going to make a difference either way nowadays. And I'm still of the volition that I've worked in the Bureau of Elections for San Juan County. I believe the elections are pretty sanctified. You have to have a lot of stuff in play to break an election. And it would take a lot of people to conspire to do that. Now, in states like Pennsylvania, that's possible. In states like Arizona, maybe that's possible. In states like New Mexico, having seen it firsthand, no. There would have been more problems during the actual voting itself that would have been highlighted and we would have seen it. The fact that in Arizona, specifically, they took the ballots and made them too small to be read, that shows malice and intent. But the court cases still aren't bearing out any fruit that show that there was election problems there. If people on that side of the fence want to win elections, they need to start, honestly, knocking on doors and ballot harvesting where it's legal. That is how you win. Now, that sucks for people who are on the right, because people that live in the right, usually live in rural areas. So it's harder to get to knock on doors, so to speak, when it takes you time to traverse geography, basically, to knock on a door, where in leftist strongholds, all you have to do is hit a couple of apartment buildings, knock on doors, and say, hey, is that your ballot? Hey, did you vote? And when they ask, who do I vote for? You say, this guy. And that's all you say. And you wait for them to hand you the ballot and you take it to the place to have them tabulated. That's how Trump lost. Now, there was a lot of laws that were changed to allow that type of behavior. That's fair to bring that up. But if you think that there was some giant cabal that actually did stuff, even though that Time magazine mentioned the cabal, that's what that cabal is actually talking about, how they put their thumb on the scale. That's how you fight it if you want to fight it legitimately, or you think that you can fight it legitimately. We're at that point now, though. Vote the best way you can, I think, but prepare all the same for anything else. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. And most importantly, get out of the vicious news cycle. Look at something different. That's what I've been doing. That's why I knew about the sub-story, and that's why I knew about other things. You know, I've been following the Ukraine war because I'm interested in the guns that are there. You know, I've mentioned on the podcast the oddball guns that I've seen that are there. What I've noticed lately when they're showing film from Ukraine is a lot of Western weapons there. You're seeing a lot of M16s. You're seeing a lot of G36s. So that's a German rifle. You're seeing a lot of really weirdly FNFALs, FALs from the UK. Why? Because these are all garrisoned, meaning that they're all on the shelf just collecting dust until they're needed. There's been HKG3s that have been popping up there. Again, that's German military that they don't have modern weapons, more modern weapons that they can hand out, but they have a ton of these as a surplus item. And Ukraine's desperate enough to get them. So, what will the stuff with Wagner mean for Ukraine? Probably nothing. I think Russia is more brainwashed than the United States is, in that they are 100% behind Putin. You know, the U.S. is the one that thinks that Putin is the evil Satan. And that, I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that we are not thinking like Russians. And Russians are different people. They live in a different society, a different world. And until they have actual coups, you know, there was an attempted coup, but it never made it to Moscow, you're not going to see anything change in Russia. And I'm not so sure that if Prigozhin had won and defeated Putin, that the Ukraine war would have ended. I'm pretty sure it would have just continued to prosecute, because the Russians don't see the war like we do. They see it as a fight against evil. And maybe it is. I'm not one to tell you. All I know is that anybody that invades another country is usually a bad person in my parlance. But that's just me. So I hope you had an amazing weekend like I did. I hope you enjoy the hot sun that we're having in New Mexico and in the United States right now. I'm not a fan of the sun myself, but, you know, I live in the Southwest. You get used to it. Like, share, subscribe, be great.
In the top, I can't let it slide. My politics are rather controversial. Who would have thought that I ain't catching all slack, and I have enemies on my ball sack? I'm thinking insanity's what you call it, and I just get a